Have you ever wondered how something as innocent as a school science project could spiral into something so much bigger, so much more dangerous, that it pulls in the police? Imagine this: a quiet afternoon in your neighborhood, the sun's shining, kids are playing, and then, suddenly, sirens pierce through the calm. It's not a car crash or a robbery, it's something far more perplexing. You're about to hear a story that could make you question how well you really know the world around you. Stick with me, because this isn't just a story about a student's science project gone wrong, it's about how an innocent idea can turn into a mystery that could keep you up at night. What happens when curiosity leads down a dark, unexpected path? And more importantly, how far would you go to uncover the truth? I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll have an answer you didn't see coming. I know you clicked on this video because you're intrigued, curious, maybe even a little skeptical about how something as seemingly simple as a student's science project could land the police on the scene. And trust me, you're not the only one. I was right there with you when I first heard this story. I thought to myself, how could a school project lead to an investigation? Well, let me take you on a journey that'll make you question what you thought you knew about the world, and maybe even yourself. From the moment you hit play, this story will pull you deeper and deeper into its web, making you ask, what really happened here? The story begins like any other school day. A student named Jack, a seemingly average 16-year-old high schooler, sets out to create what he thinks will be a cool and unique science project. You know how it goes, you've probably been there yourself, scrambling to put something together that'll impress the teacher, maybe even the whole class. But Jack, unlike most students, had an idea that no one could have predicted. He wanted to explore the concept of energy, specifically, how it can be harnessed from unlikely sources. That's where things started to go awry. As Jack dove into his project, he began experimenting with materials no one would have ever considered appropriate for a high school science fair, and what seemed like a harmless experiment at first quickly began to spiral out of control. The deeper he got into it, the more bizarre his project became. And that's where the mystery begins. What Jack didn't realize, what no one realized, was that the boundaries between simple curiosity and danger are thin, almost invisible. And when those boundaries are crossed, the consequences can be catastrophic. The project was initially just an afterthought, something meant to impress his teacher and maybe give him a decent grade. But then, one day, he made a discovery that would not only turn his life upside down but also pull the authorities into the middle of what seemed like a simple science experiment. Now, you may be thinking, how could a project at school possibly get the police involved? What could be so serious? I promise you, this is not some overblown clickbait, this is a real mystery that happened in real life, and the answers are shocking. As the story unfolds, you'll meet characters who, just like you, didn't expect anything extraordinary to come from this project. Jack's best friend, Sarah, had no idea what her friend was getting into. She had her own concerns about grades, college, and what dress she was going to wear to the dance. She never imagined that one conversation would change everything. Then there's Mr. Rogers, the science teacher, who, on the surface, seemed like just another grumpy educator who was too tired of his students' antics to care about anything beyond their homework. But what Mr. Rogers discovered about Jack's project was so disturbing that it set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. It was a snowball effect. One tiny, seemingly insignificant action led to a massive event that would forever alter Jack's life. So why are we even talking about this? Well, it's because we've all been there. We've all had ideas that seemed harmless or innocent at the time but ended up being much bigger and more dangerous than we ever imagined. We've all found ourselves in situations where we had no idea what was coming, where one decision could change everything. This is what happened to Jack, and this is why you need to watch this video till the very end. I'm not just telling you a story, I'm taking you on a journey through twists and turns that will leave you questioning what's real and what's not. As we go deeper into the details of Jack's project, you'll realize that this wasn't just a student's failure, it was a mistake that could have cost more than just a grade. This project wasn't something he could just brush off, it was a potential disaster waiting to happen. But here's where things get really intense. What started as a student science project morphed into something much more serious. Something that started in the confines of a high school lab began to affect the entire community. The police were involved, local authorities started questioning everyone involved, and Jack, along with his friends, found themselves caught in a web of suspicion that neither they nor their families were prepared for. What they thought was just a harmless experiment quickly became a national story, and soon, everyone wanted to know the truth. Was this a harmless mistake? Or was there something darker, something more sinister, hiding beneath the surface? The real question I want you to keep in mind as you watch this video is this: what would you do if you were in Jack's shoes? If you accidentally crossed the line between curiosity and danger, how far would you go to fix it? Would you admit it, or would you try to cover it up? And more importantly, how would you deal with the consequences when they spiral out of control? This video isn't just about a student's science project, it's about what happens when one mistake grows into a mystery that nobody can solve. It's about how an innocent idea can turn into a nightmare. It's about how the people closest to you can become involved in something far bigger than they could ever imagine. And it's about how, in the blink of an eye, everything you thought you knew could be shattered. Now, you may be wondering how this all unfolds. What exactly went wrong with Jack's project? How did a harmless science experiment turn into a full-blown investigation? And what really happened when the police got involved? Well, the answer to that is just around the corner, but I can't give it all to you just yet. This is only the beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I know you're sitting there, on the edge of your seat, asking yourself what's going to happen, and I'm here to tell you, stay with me. You're going to want to see this story through to the end. There's more to this than just a kid's failed project. There's more at stake here than you could ever have imagined. So, hit that play button, stick with me, and let's uncover the truth together. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll have answers you didn't see coming. The question is, are you ready to find out what really happened when Jack's science project got the police involved? Keep watching, because the twist will blow your mind. And trust me, you won't believe how it all ends. As we dive deeper into Jack's story, it's important to understand just how ordinary he seemed on the surface. Jack wasn't the class genius, nor was he the troublemaker who always found his way into the principal's office. He was the kid you might have passed in the hallway, too busy with your own thoughts to even give him a second glance. But lately, something had changed about him, something subtle, almost imperceptible. He wasn't the same carefree kid he used to be. His friends, especially Sarah, had noticed a shift in his behavior. There was a tension in his voice when he talked, a certain unease that had never been there before. It was as though something was weighing on him, something he couldn't or wouldn't share with anyone. For weeks, Jack had been spending more and more time alone in his room. Late nights hunched over his desk, his computer screen glowing in the darkness, his hands scribbling on pages filled with complex equations and obscure scientific diagrams. At first, Sarah thought it was just another phase, another one of his late-night study sessions. But as the days wore on, even she started to feel like there was something bigger at play. She had asked him about it once, about the project, but Jack just brushed it off with a forced smile, saying he was working on something cool for the science fair. It was the kind of answer that, while vague, seemed normal enough. But deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her friend was keeping something from her. It wasn't just the late nights or the strange experiments that raised red flags. It was the people Jack had started talking to. He wasn't one to trust easily, but over the last month, he'd begun interacting with some individuals that made Sarah, and even his parents, uncomfortable. There was this one man, a local scientist, who Jack had met at a community fair a few months back. The guy had a reputation. He wasn't exactly someone you'd introduce to your family at Thanksgiving. Rumors about him swirled in their small town, but Jack seemed drawn to him, and he had even gone so far as to meet with him several times after school. The man was a former university professor who'd fallen out of favor after a controversial experiment was shut down years ago. His name was Dr. Daniels, and to say his methods were unconventional would be an understatement. No one knew for sure if the rumors were true, but there were whispers about the work he'd done, things that weren't quite legal, things that didn't quite make sense. But Jack was intrigued by him. The allure of the forbidden, the mystery of the unknown, seemed to call to him. And as he got deeper into his project, he found himself leaning on Dr. Daniels more and more. There were meetings in obscure locations, late-night phone calls, even cryptic messages exchanged. Jack was becoming obsessed with his project, and the lines between what was just a school assignment and something far more dangerous began to blur. Sarah didn't know the details of what Jack was working on, but she knew that whatever it wasn't something a normal high school science fair should include. There were other things, too, small moments that stuck in her mind. Like the time she saw him in the school hallway, hurriedly packing his books into his bag, his face pale and his eyes wide. When she asked him what was wrong, he simply said, "Nothing. I'm just tired." But it didn't sit right with her. Tired wasn't the word for it. Jack was rattled, and whatever it was that had him spooked seemed to be taking its toll on him in ways that no one could quite understand. Then there was the day the police first showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon, just a few days before the science fair, when the atmosphere in their school suddenly shifted. Jack's project had been accepted for display, just like any other, unassuming, inoffensive, and safe. But as soon as the police arrived, the tone of the entire school changed. Rumors began circulating that the science fair wasn't the only thing under investigation. There were talks of missing substances, strange reactions, and potential dangers linked to Jack's project. But when Sarah heard those rumors, she couldn't believe them. How could it be true? Jack wasn't dangerous. He was just a student, a kid with an idea, right? Yet, the more Sarah tried to ignore the rising tension, the more she realized that everything she thought she knew about her best friend was beginning to crumble. The police were looking for something. They were asking questions that went beyond the boundaries of a high school project. What did you put in your project, Jack? Where did you get these chemicals? Have you had any unusual contacts lately? These were the kinds of questions being asked, and though no one could say for sure what they were referring to, the suspicion was palpable. And then, the real shock came. When Sarah visited Jack's house later that evening, she noticed something odd. The place was eerily quiet. His parents weren't home, which wasn't all that unusual, but there was a strange energy in the air, an unsettled feeling that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Jack wasn't in his room, but she knew he had been there earlier. As she walked through the house, her eyes were drawn to his desk, covered in papers, some with scribbled formulas, others with unfamiliar symbols. But there was something else. A strange machine, one that hadn't been there before. It was an odd-looking device, almost like a homemade generator, with wires and metal components sticking out at odd angles. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, something that shouldn't have been in a high schooler's bedroom. It was at that moment that Sarah realized just how deep this had gone, how far Jack had fallen into something bigger than any of them could have imagined. And it wasn't just a matter of grades anymore, it was a matter of safety, of danger. What had Jack stumbled upon in his project? And how far would he go to finish what he had started? Meanwhile, the suspicion grew. Some began to speculate that Jack had gotten in over his head, that the project was no longer just about a science fair. Had he gotten involved with the wrong people? Was Dr. Daniels pulling the strings behind the scenes? Or was there something else, something even more sinister, lurking in the shadows? The pieces weren't fitting together, and yet, they were all pointing toward the same chilling possibility. Whatever Jack had discovered could change everything. As the days passed, the police grew more involved, and their investigation deepened. Sarah found herself drawn into a maze of questions, each answer leading to more confusion. Was Jack in danger? Had he made a grave mistake? Or was there something much darker hiding beneath the surface, something that could have terrible consequences for them all? The tension reached a boiling point when Jack finally went missing. And that's when everything came to a head, when the search for answers became a race against time. But the question remained, where was Jack? And more importantly, was he the one who had caused this mess? Or was he merely a pawn in a much larger game? It read, "You're too late. It's already begun." What did that mean? Was Jack still alive? Was there something bigger than any of them had realized at play? The only thing Sarah knew for sure was that she was about to uncover something far darker than she could have ever imagined, and it was all spiraling out of control. The chilling message left Sarah more unsettled than ever before. You're too late. It's already begun. What was she too late for? What had already started? Her mind raced, but no matter how much she tried to make sense of it, the pieces just wouldn't fit together. There was something bigger happening here, something far more dangerous than just Jack's science project. And just as she thought she might be on the verge of cracking the case wide open, things took an unexpected turn, one that would complicate everything even further. The following day, Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a cryptic message from an unknown number. It was from her own brother, Alex, who had been away on a school trip for the past week. He hadn't been involved in the drama surrounding Jack's disappearance, and Sarah had been trying to keep it that way, not wanting to drag him into the mess. But this text was different from any she had received from him before. "Sarah," it began, "I found something in Dad's old files. Something weird. You need to see it." Her heart skipped a beat. Why would Alex be looking through their father's things? Their dad had passed away a few years ago, and his old documents were nothing more than forgotten remnants of their past. But if Alex had stumbled upon something important, it could change everything. Sarah tried to calm herself, convincing herself it was nothing, maybe a simple misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the kind of thing Alex would message her about without a reason. When she met up with him later that day, he didn't waste any time. He led her straight to his bedroom, where he had laid out a few scattered pieces of paper on his desk. At first, they didn't make sense. They were just old documents from their father's work, nothing out of the ordinary. But as Sarah picked them up and read through them, she felt a strange sense of dread. There were references to research on alternative energy sources, experimental projects on harnessing electricity in ways that were considered unorthodox. These weren't just casual papers from an office job. These were blueprints for something bigger, something that, if combined with the right knowledge, could be incredibly dangerous. And as Sarah read further, she realized with a sinking feeling in her stomach that the research was eerily similar to the things Jack had been working on. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Was this what Jack had been digging into? Had he discovered something that connected back to her own family, to her father's past? And if that was true, why had he never mentioned it? Why had no one ever talked about it? As Sarah tried to make sense of these documents, Alex seemed equally confused, his brow furrowed in disbelief. He had no idea what any of it meant, but something about it felt wrong. The more they looked through the papers, the more Sarah felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just about Jack anymore. It wasn't just about some science project gone wrong. There was a bigger, hidden story here, a story that had been buried in their family's past, one that no one wanted to talk about, but which was now resurfacing in a way no one could have predicted. As Sarah and Alex sat in his room, trying to piece the mystery together, Sarah's mind wandered back to the strange warning she had received from Detective Harper. "You need to stop looking into this," he had told her. It was becoming clearer than ever that the forces at play were not just local, this was something much larger. Someone was trying to bury the truth, and they would go to any lengths to do so. But the more Sarah uncovered, the more questions arose. Why had her father been involved in these kinds of experiments? Was it possible that Jack's project had somehow triggered the resurfacing of something darker from their family's past? She had no answers, only more confusion. But one thing was becoming painfully clear: whoever had warned her to stop searching had good reason to be afraid. They knew what she was getting closer to. But as if that weren't enough, another strange occurrence added to the mounting tension. That evening, while Sarah was reviewing the documents her brother had found, she received an unexpected call from Olivia. Of all the people, Olivia had been the last person Sarah expected to reach out. She'd been acting odd for weeks, but Sarah hadn't thought much of it. Olivia had always been a little too perfect, a little too involved in the school's social scene. But now, as Sarah answered the phone, Olivia's voice was laced with a nervous edge, something she hadn't heard before. "I know what you're doing," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "I know you've been looking into Jack's project, and you need to stop. You don't understand what you're getting into. It's not just about him, it's about all of us." Sarah's heart raced as she tried to process what Olivia was saying. "What are you talking about?" she asked, a knot forming in her stomach. "Why are you warning me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Olivia finally spoke again, her words were barely audible. "There are things you don't know. There are people involved in this, dangerous people. And you're not going to like what you find. Trust me, Sarah, I'm telling you for your own good." Before Sarah could respond, Olivia hung up abruptly, leaving her staring at her phone in disbelief. Was Olivia trying to protect her? Or was she part of the larger mystery herself? Had she been involved with Jack's project more than she let on? Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation closing in on her. No one seemed to be on her side anymore, and the more she dug into this, the more it seemed like everyone had something to hide. Now, the puzzle pieces weren't just scattered, they were beginning to contradict each other. The documents her brother had found linked her father's research to Jack's work, but that didn't explain how Olivia, who seemed so disconnected from the situation, was suddenly involved. Why had she warned Sarah? Was she trying to cover her tracks, or did she know something that Sarah didn't? And what about the coordinates Sarah had discovered? Could they somehow be tied to her father's past? Was there something in those woods, something in the cabin, that had remained hidden for decades? As Sarah sat there, trying to connect the dots, the tension was unbearable. It was like every person she spoke to, every lead she followed, only deepened the mystery further. No one was telling the full truth, and it was becoming clear that someone didn't want her to uncover what was really happening. But no matter how many roadblocks were thrown in her path, Sarah knew she couldn't stop now. She was closer than ever to the truth, but every twist and turn she took only raised more questions. And just when Sarah thought she might have a breakthrough, she received one more message. This one wasn't a warning, it was a confession. But it didn't come from who she expected. The message was short, to the point. It's not just Jack. They found something else. You have no idea what you're dealing with. She had spent the entire evening with Alex, going over the documents their father had left behind. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to connect in her mind, but each revelation seemed to raise more questions than answers. Why had her father hidden this research? Was Jack somehow involved in something much larger than she had originally thought? Had he stumbled upon something so dangerous that people would stop at nothing to keep it a secret? They were just about to call it a night when the power went out. The storm outside had been building all evening, and now, as thunder rumbled overhead and lightning lit up the sky, the house plunged into darkness. Alex was the first to grab a flashlight, but as he shined it around the room, Sarah noticed something strange. Someone was standing in the doorway. She froze, heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was barely visible, just a dark silhouette against the flickering light, but she could make out enough to know it wasn't Alex. Her pulse spiked as fear gripped her chest, her mind racing to process what was happening. Alex turned around, his face lighting up with recognition. "Mom," he called out, confused. But when the figure stepped forward, it wasn't their mother. It was someone else entirely. The man was tall, dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by the shadows. Sarah barely had time to react before he lunged at them, knocking the flashlight out of Alex's hand. It all happened so quickly. The man grabbed Alex by the arm, pulling him away from Sarah, his grip like iron. "Run," the man muttered, his voice low and cold. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness outside. Sarah's heart raced as she stumbled toward the door, her mind reeling with panic. She could hear Alex shouting for her, his voice getting fainter and fainter as he was dragged away. The rain was coming down in torrents now, the wind howling through the cracks of the house as Sarah raced after them. But the storm made it impossible to see, and her thoughts were clouded with dread. Who was this man? Why had he taken Alex? Was this connected to Jack's project? Was her brother somehow involved in whatever dark forces were hunting them? She had no answers, just an overwhelming sense of urgency. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone to dial 911, but before she could press the call button, the screen flickered and went black. The battery was dead. She cursed under her breath, panic rising in her chest. She had to find Alex. She had to figure out what was happening before it was too late. As she stepped outside into the storm, the cold rain soaked her to the bone, but she hardly noticed. She had only one thought: find Alex. She ran blindly into the night, her heart hammering in her chest, her mind spinning. But with each passing minute, the terror she felt deepened. What if the man was still out there, waiting for her? What if he wasn't the only one? Was Alex still alive? Was he hurt? The wind whipped around her, carrying with it the sound of footsteps behind her. She froze. They were getting closer. Someone was following her, someone who wasn't just walking behind her, but moving with purpose, intent on catching up. She had no idea how, but she could feel the presence behind her like a shadow, looming closer with every step she took. She glanced over her shoulder, but saw nothing but the rain and darkness. Was it just her imagination? Or was it the same man who had taken Alex? She didn't know, but she couldn't risk it. She turned sharply, ducking into the nearby alley, hoping to lose whatever or whoever was tailing her. But as she made her way deeper into the alley, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She wasn't alone. The alley was narrow and suffocating, the walls closing in on her as she moved forward, her heart pounding in her ears. The footsteps followed. Whoever it was, they were getting closer, closing in. She tried to keep her breathing steady, but fear was overwhelming her every sense. And then, just as she reached the end of the alley, she heard it. A voice, low and menacing, drifting through the air. "You should have stayed away," the voice said, and it was like the sound of ice scraping against metal. Sarah's blood ran cold. She turned around, her breath catching in her throat, but no one was there. The alley was empty. Yet the voice lingered, echoing in her mind. "You should have stayed away." It was the same warning she had received in the messages. But now, it was clear it wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. In a panic, Sarah turned and ran again, her feet slipping on the wet pavement. She could feel the danger pressing in on all sides. Someone was after her. And someone had already taken Alex. Her mind raced as she tried to process everything, the research, the warnings, the shadowy figure, and now the disappearance of her brother. But with each passing second, the terrifying reality set in. Whoever was behind this knew who she was, knew what she had uncovered, and they would stop at nothing to keep her from finding the truth. As Sarah stumbled into the street, gasping for breath, her thoughts spiraled out of control. How had it all come to this? What was Jack involved in? And why was she being dragged into something so dangerous, something so far beyond her understanding? With no phone, no answers, and no one to trust, Sarah was on her own. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized no one was truly on her side. She was surrounded by people who either didn't know the truth, or worse, were hiding it from her. The darkness had taken hold of everything, and Sarah knew that whatever was happening, it was just beginning. But with every step she took, she felt herself being pulled deeper into a web she couldn't escape, one that seemed designed to destroy her and anyone who got too close to the truth. Just when Sarah thought she couldn't feel any more cornered, the world around her shifted again, this time in a way that she never saw coming, and the truth she had been chasing was about to twist into something she couldn't have prepared for. The storm had finally passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake, but Sarah's heart still pounded as she moved through the city streets, her mind racing with everything that had happened. She hadn't seen Alex since that night. She hadn't seen anyone, really, just shadows, whispers, and threats. But she had to keep pushing forward. She couldn't stop. Not now. Not when she was so close. She knew she had to find answers, and in her gut, she felt that somewhere, someone held the key. But it wasn't just the storm that had left Sarah unsettled. It was the phone call she received that afternoon. It had come in the middle of the night, right after the figure had grabbed Alex, an unfamiliar voice, distorted by static, warning her again. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into," it said. "It's not just Jack. It's your father. It's all connected, and it's all a lie." But the real twist didn't come until a few hours later, when Sarah decided to confront Olivia. She had to. Olivia had been acting so strange, and with the pieces of the puzzle seemingly falling into place, Sarah was ready to confront her. She had to know what Olivia knew, why she'd warned her, and why she seemed to be so deep into the web of mystery surrounding Jack's project. The tension between them was thick when Sarah knocked on Olivia's door. But it was in that moment, as she stood alone in the sterile facility, that the truth finally began to settle in. Everything she had fought for, the investigation, the questions, the desperate search for answers, it had all been part of something much larger, something far beyond her comprehension. The research, her father, Jack, Olivia, Harper, all of them, they weren't just players in a game of science or conspiracy. They had been complicit in something far darker, far more dangerous than Sarah could have ever imagined. And as she stood there, in the heart of it all, She realized that the answers she sought had never been about bringing justice or solving a mystery. It had been about survival. The cold, harsh reality of the world she now inhabited was one of manipulation, power, and control. The forces she had uncovered weren't just a secret, they were a system. And she had been a pawn in their plan, whether she had realized it or not. Her mind raced as she took tentative steps forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come so far, and yet there was still so much left unanswered. What had her father truly been working on? What had they all been trying to unlock? Was it really, as Jack had said, an experiment with time, with space, with reality itself? The thought made her stomach twist, a cold knot forming in the pit of her stomach. Suddenly, a soft clicking noise broke the silence, and Sarah's head snapped to the side. It was a door opening, hidden in the far corner of the room, one she hadn't noticed before. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor as a figure emerged, and for a moment, Sarah thought her heart might stop. It was her father, but different. He was dressed in a sleek, black suit, his face still the same, but his eyes were cold, calculating. The warmth she had once known in them had been replaced by something darker, something more terrifying. He walked toward her with an air of finality, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. "Sarah," he said, his voice void of any emotion. "I didn't want this for you. I didn't want you to be caught in this web. But you've done what you needed to do. You've uncovered the truth." His gaze shifted to the walls, the empty space around them. The truth that was never meant to be known. The truth that is far too dangerous for anyone to understand. "You were never supposed to know what we were really working on. This facility, the research, it wasn't just about scientific discovery. It was about control. Absolute, total control." Sarah felt the weight of his words sink in, the impact of his confession hitting her with the force of a freight train. She had spent so much time looking for answers, so many sleepless nights trying to piece together the puzzle, but now she realized that the answers she had found were nothing but the tip of an iceberg. There was so much more hidden beneath the surface, so much that had been deliberately kept from her. Her father's voice broke through her thoughts, and she looked up to see him standing in front of her. "I did what I had to do to protect you. To protect everyone. But it was never enough. No one can escape it now. No one can stop what's coming." "Coming?" Sarah echoed, her voice barely a whisper, barely able to process what he was saying. "What are you talking about? What's going to happen?" He looked at her with an unreadable expression. "The project is already in motion. The system we created, it's far bigger than this facility, than all of us. The control we've developed, the power we've unlocked, it's going to reshape everything. Your search for the truth, it's only brought you closer to the point of no return." The finality of his words echoed in her chest like a drumbeat, a stark reminder of everything that had led her to this point. But before she could respond, something shifted in the air, a low hum that vibrated through the walls, and suddenly, the lights flickered once more. "Everything is already in motion," her father repeated, his voice growing distant as the hum grew louder, the floor vibrating beneath their feet. "And now, there's nothing you can do to stop it." With those final words, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the distance, leaving Sarah standing alone in the room, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest.